Defining Afro-futurism and Afro-futurist text can be limited when examining them from the context of the genre being a hard intersection between science fiction and African aesthetics. It can be insightful to dissect text that does not always fall into the literal definitions of the genre. By doing this, it is possible to open greater discussions about the concerns and issues of the genre and how certain texts address them. One interesting platform to examine the genre would be the 2018 animated film Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse. The film revolves around the character of Miles Morales, an Afro-Latino teenager who finds himself in the middle of a multi-dimensional conflict that requires him to take on the mantle of the famous superhero Spider-Man. The film functions as an adaptation of two comics, 2011's Ultimate Spider-Man Miles Morales, which introduced the character, and 2014's Spider-Verse, which provided the multiverse crossover facet of the film. By examining the role Miles plays in both the film and its influences, it is possible to discover how they address Afro-futurist issues. The main goal of this essay is to examine Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse, how it functions as a piece of Afro-futurist text, and how its influences contribute to discussions regarding the concerns of the genre.
All three of these pieces of media examined iterate on the core themes of the character being one of responsibility as a guiding moral force. All three of the media also use the concept of death to motivate the protagonists. These concepts motivate the heroes to deliver in areas where they fail. These elements are not novel to superhero media or even specifically Spider-Man, and Into the Spider-Verse borrows elements from its influences to create its own iteration on classic Spider-Man tropes. The film takes the death of a traditional Spider-Man from Ultimate Spider-Man, while also implementing the threat of imminent death for alternate Spider-Heroes from the 2014 comic. The theme of responsibility in most Spider-Man media serves to write the character as a model for the audience to learn from. The 2018 film differs slightly from this approach as it uses the theme of responsibility as an invitation for the audience to do good in their own way, turning it into a quality that allows the audience to express themselves rather than establishing the main character as a unique breed of virtuousness. Afro-futurism can have several different definitions depending on the medium, institution, or perspective. For this discussion, a definition given by Isaiah Lavender III's text on defining Afro-futurism will be utilized. Afro-futurism is a set of race-inflected reading protocols designed to investigate the optimisms and anxieties framing the future imaginings of Black people. The author offers another anecdote on the genre. Afro-futurism must be considered utopian to some degree because it seeks to perform world building on a scale that imagines Black being in new ways, in new worlds where race and racism sometimes exist and sometimes do not. These definitions break down Afrofuturism as a medium by which Africans can use the speculative nature of science fiction to explore the future of the race and grapple with concerns and trauma of the past. The ultimate desire for individuals within and writing Afrofuturist text is to discover a hopeful future for themselves. The optimism or hope expressed by these texts emerge from a desire for a place and identity in the future. Using these definitions and goals of the genre, it's possible to use the framework of Afrofuturism as a lens to examine concerns expressed by the film and its influences. Analyzing Into the Spider-Verse and its influences emerges three Afrofuturist concerns: upward social mobility, the dismantlement of the canon, and the ability to forge an identity. Addressed both briefly in the film and in Miles' introductory comic is the idea of upward social mobility. In the 2011 comic Ultimate Spider-Man Miles Morales, Miles is introduced as a teenager who comes from a lower income home. At the start of his story, he wins a lottery to attend a prestigious charter school. His parents are elated for their son to gain a better start than they did, but Miles can only focus on the sorrow and pain of the families who did not win. He questions if it's possible to improve in the world without causing sadness for others. In this way, the comic makes a statement about social mobility, that resources are limited and that conflict and rivalry are expected. Miles' success comes from the despair of others. The second comment on social mobility comes from the conflict between Miles' father and his uncle. Miles' father resents his uncle for not giving up his life as a thief. He believes that his inability to advance in life comes from his old habits. Miles' father's change in career is presented as him making a change for a new life for himself and his family. In this case, social mobility requires people to alter their lifestyles and morals for a chance at upward movement. 2008 film's comment on the connection between social mobility, sacrifice, and conflict are similar. Miles' father comments on lifestyle echoes the talking points of the uplift movements championed by African American preachers during the antebellum period. This movement focused on the moral and intellectual development of the race as a means of social enhancement and gaining respect from their white superiors. While the catalyst for Miles' enrollment into the school is the same between the comic and the film has a larger focus on how this conflict interacts with identity. Miles feels comfortable in his neighborhood and his old school, while his parents believe that this new charter school will improve his future. Miles' conflict comes from feeling creatively stifled in his new environment. His identity and personality feels restricted and strained while trying to keep up with the standards of the charter school. His internal struggle speaks to the idea that upward social mobility comes from a sacrifice or change of identity. In order to fit into the world of prestige, one must make changes to themselves to appear acceptable. Dan Hassler-Forrest examines this conflict in his Afro-futurist reading of the film The Wiz. Dorothy's initial malaise stems from her inability to participate in the black community life that seems to come naturally to the rest of her family. Only by confronting an urban world that is a dystopian nightmare to non-whites is she able to construct a meaningful sense of community in the midst of an oppressive, violent, and exploitative social environment. And since the film's cast excludes white bodies entirely, institutional racism is keenly displayed onto the organization of urban space itself. By imagining downtown Manhattan as a militarized gated community, The Wiz therefore remains all too relevant in the context of Ferguson, I Can't Breathe, and the Black Lives Matter movement. The framing of the new school to Miles creates internal expectations that he feels he cannot keep up with. His opportunities for success seem limited to him. In his early moments, he views failure as the only way out. However, by the end of the film, he gains faith in his abilities and finds ways, both as Spider-Man and as a student, to meet those expectations. He's able to break past the limitations of upward social mobility, not through a rejection of his identity or through failure, but by embracing his uniqueness. Another concern that is examined by the film and its influences is the concept of the canon. However, it's important to distinguish this definition from how it's usually used. Rather than referring to lore, world building, or definitive events that occur on a timeline, this discussion of the term refers to its commonly used literary definition. When referring to canon literary works, it is often regarding texts that are seen as classical, seminal, or influential. The existence of a seminal work requires literary authorities, readers, or time to dub it with that title. The issue that Afro-Futurism aims to examine is who gets to be part of the canon. Mario World's and Henry Miller's essay on the topic dissects this conflict as well. The canon is not merely a collection of texts. Rather, the canon represents a cultural construction of knowledge centered in whiteness that institutions deem superior and essential. Canon works are not just simply revered for their contributions to the world of literature, they are the lens which adjacent texts, past texts, and future texts are scrutinized. In regards to discussions about race, Mario World's and Henry Miller's concern with the canon also revolves around white perspectives on topics such as racism and slavery. The influence of these white authors and the prestige of the canon limits the kinds of voices that are able to participate in these dialogues and which voices are seen as legitimate. The functionality of the canon can be examined through the lens of the 2014 comic book event, Spiderverse. In this crossover event, the multiverse is threatened by a family of vampiric hunters called the Inheritors, who aim to rid all dimensions of individuals with spider powers. This causes a version of Peter Parker with the mind of his rival Doc Ock to rally together an army of spider people to deal with this cataclysmic event. This superior Spider-Man works as a contrast to the traditional Spider-Man after he appears in the middle of the story. After a scuffle between the two heroes, the traditional Spider is dubbed leader of the army, not just because he has history with the Inheritors, but also due to his moral code. While Superior Spider-Man considers himself a hero, his ego and his clinical brutality prevent him from being the superior hero. In this way, the traditional Spider-Man operates as a standard not just for the Spider Heroes, but for all heroes. This is briefly commented on between a Spider-Man from India and one from the United Kingdom. The Indian Spider expresses how he feels like a counterfeit copy or warped reflection of the traditional Spider-Man, like he cannot compare to him, When the UK Spider attempts to comfort him, the Indian Spider comments on whether the UK one or any other hero is simply a poor imitation of the original. This conversation does not see any resolution or further development in the story. This exchange represents the harm of the canon, how it excludes concepts that do not fit the classical standard. Even if the seminal work or the authorities dubbing it so are not the ones condemning other works, disenfranchised voices might be conditioned to question their own worth. Regarding Miles Morales, his involvement in the comic and discussions revolving around the canon are minimal. Miles' introduction into the event starts with him observing the gravestone of his dead mother, discussing his inadequacies as a hero. It is interesting to note how this scene comes after another scene involving several members of the Spider Army declaring the traditional Spider-Man as the best of them all. After Miles' lament is interrupted by one of the Spider Hunters, he joins the group of heroes. After this, his involvement in the plot is limited, being relegated to rounding up more heroes for the Spider Army. Much like the first example, the canon ends up creating self-worth issues in the minds of the unrepresented. The diverse group of heroes only serve to bolster up the image of the standard. This contrasts with Miles' involvement in the 2018 film. While the film sets up a traditional Spider-Man as a standard, it does so to establish the qualities of a hero that the alternate spiders and the audience can find in themselves. While the other spiders have different backgrounds and identities, the thing that unites them, Standard and Miles, is perseverance and the willingness to always do the right thing. Miles' mentors teach him to use these qualities as a guide to find himself as a person and as a hero. In contrast to the 2014 Spiderverse comic, the 2018 film sets up and examines the purpose of the canon. Rather than using it as a benchmark for quality of a work, Into the Spider-Verse aims to rework the canon to include anyone and everyone. With Miles as the central figure of the story, much focus is put on how he contrasts between the other spider heroes. The biggest difference between him and the others is the gap in experience. All the other spiders have been heroes for years, with their formative years defined by personal loss and hardship. While Miles lacks the experience the others have, he has different abilities from the group. More importantly, he is set apart as the only one to resolve the conflict, as the other spiders cannot reside in his dimension safely for long. This added responsibility to save the day, alongside his unique powers, grants Miles Morales the ability to carve out his own identity among the other spiders and within the standard of superhero literary canon. His differences and unique brand of creativity are tools utilized to save the day when he is alone. By having the film make his unique attributes his strength, it grants Miles Morales the goal of forging his own identity without the limitations of a standard to adhere to. Looking at the ways the film defines the canon and explores themes of individuality, it is also important to examine how it is able to do these things from a sonic and visual standpoint. Much as the diverse cast of alternate universe heroes contrasts with the traditional Spider-Man in the 2014 comic, the 2018 comic contrasts with the collection of past Spider-Man films. From the audio perspective, the 2018 film aims to ground itself with its use of hip-hop inspired percussion as a means to represent the diverse inhabitants of Brooklyn. In many ways, the grand orchestrated superhero scores of past Spider-Man films create a detachment from the character, shaping him as a mythic figure separate from the audience. The audience do not put themselves into the shoes of the hero, but rather watch him from afar, in awe. There's a merit to that type of sonic characterization that otherwise does not work in a film revolving around the potential in everyone. The hip-hop score helps the audience to relate to Miles' struggles, as the soundtrack imitates the kind of music he enjoys listening to. The percussion of the soundtrack is tied to his progression as a character. The percussion starts off as haphazard and frantic as he comes to grips with his new powers. As it grows to become more competent, the percussion enriches the traditional superhero sound. Miles makes his mark within the film as well as in its score. The visuals also help the film illustrate its themes. There's a large focus on handcrafted aesthetics and imperfections within the use of lower frame rates, details on character models appearing hand-drawn, and uneven halftones reminiscent of classic comic books. The influence of older media continues in its aesthetics of the alternate spiders from 1930s silent films, classic cartoons, and vintage anime. The focus on the imperfections of older media contributes to the inclusive themes of the media. In this way, Into the Spider-Verse takes the approach of adapting not only Spider-Man in its multiple iterations, but the platonic idea of the Western comic book medium as a whole, incorporating as many of its distinctive qualities and idioms as possible. Sam Summers also challenges the aesthetics of the film by elaborating that it could be considered reductive to condense an entire art form to a set of qualities that are actually only present within works from a particular time, place, or genre. Into the Spider-Verse is not strictly innocent of this, but it compensates by artfully activating perennially recognizable, if outdated, conventions like Ben-Day dots and offset colors as potent signifiers to achieve a particular cinematic effect, foregoing its artificiality to highlight its stylistic innovation. The film works around the potential problematic implications of visual antique theming by championing ideas of individuality and imperfection. By addressing three concerns of Afro-futurist texts: upward social mobility, the restrictions of the canon, and the desire to forge an identity, Into the Spider-Verse positions Miles Morales as the goal of the genre. In the film's resolution, he is able to find peace in his new school by finding his own unique way to meet his great expectations, circumventing the conflict of sacrificing his identity for social mobility. He is able to succeed applying the universal qualities of Spider-Man to his own approach, dismantling the restrictions of the canon. Finally, due to his success, he is able to forge his own identity not just in the world of the film, but also outside of it. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse develops the discussions of Afro-futurist concerns started by its influences in order to provide the character of Miles Morales and those who aspire to be like him a place in the future.